I paid extra to make sure the snow fell on time. That's not a metaphor. That's a receipt. Page 3, line 7, atmospheric effects, premium winter simulation. When you're a millionaire long enough, the universe stops saying no and starts sending invoices. The snow outside my windows drifted down in obedient, cinematic silence, the kind that makes people believe their lives are about to change. Mine already had. I just didn't know it yet. My name is Walter Hayes, 73 years old. Widower on paper, optimist by habit, cynic by experience. I built half my fortune by trusting people, and the other half by learning never to do it again. This Christmas was supposed to be different, final, perfect, the kind of holiday you design when you're convinced love is a logistical problem that can be solved with enough money and planning. The tree arrived from British Columbia 3 days ago, escorted like a head of state, 40 feet tall, perfectly symmetrical, smelling like forests that still believe in themselves. I stood in the great hall watching the staff decorate it while I drank coffee strong enough to wake the dead or at least make them complain. Gold ornaments, white lights, no tinsel. Tinsel is for people who still lie to themselves. Mr. Hayes, the chef has arrived, my assistant Claire said, appearing silently, as always. She had mastered the art of being indispensable without being noticed. That talent alone was worth 6 figures. Of course he has, I said. Did he bring his ego separately, or is it packed with the knives? She smiled the way professionals do when they've heard that joke before and know better than to improve it. The chef was French. Of course he was. If you're going to fake perfection, you might as well hire someone from a country that perfected pretending centuries ago. He planned a menu that required words I couldn't pronounce and ingredients that had passports. Everything was scheduled down to the minute. The guests would arrive at 6. Champagne at 6:05. Memories at 6:30. Regrets sometime after dessert. This was the Christmas I had been building toward my entire adult life. Not for my business partners, not for society pages, not even for my estranged relatives who suddenly remembered my address every December. This was for Eleanor Brooks. Eleanor was the reason I owned a house big enough to get lost in. She was the reason I learned how to apologize without meaning it, and how to mean it without apologizing. She was the woman I loved for 40 years. Which sounds romantic until you realize it included 10 years of marriage, 15 years of distance, and 15 years of convincing myself that patience was a virtue instead of fear. I had invited her to my house for Christmas for the first time since the divorce. Officially, it was a gathering of old friends, and officially, it was my last expensive attempt to prove that devotion ages better than betrayal. In another room, Eleanor Brooks adjusted her coat and wondered why her hands were shaking. She hadn't been inside this house since the lawyers finished tearing it apart politely. Everything was bigger than she remembered. The ceilings, the silence, even the air felt expensive. She told herself she was here out of courtesy, not hope. She told herself many things that evening. Some of them were even true. Back in the great hall, I rehearsed lines I would never say. I had bought gifts that suggested thoughtfulness without desperation. A vintage watch. A first edition book she once mentioned loving before we learned how to weaponize small comments. I believed that if I arranged the night carefully enough, the past would behave. That was my mistake. The past never behaves. It waits. The first guests arrived early, which is how you know they're uncomfortable. Old business associates. A former senator who now sold advice by the hour. Couples who smiled too hard and laughed too late. They wandered through my house as if it were a museum exhibit titled "What Happens When You Win Too Much." Someone complimented the tree. Someone else asked how I managed to find such peace in a place like this. I told them peace is easy when you can afford distance. At 6:20, Eleanor walked in. Time did something rude. The room tilted. Conversations thinned out, as if everyone sensed they were about to be extras in a scene that mattered. She wore a dark green coat, simple, elegant, stubbornly practical. The same way she used to dress when she didn't want to admit she was trying. "Walter," she said. "Eleanor." We smiled like people who had learned manners instead of forgiveness. I offered her champagne. She accepted. That alone felt like progress. "You've outdone yourself," she said, glancing around. "It looks like a movie." "I always hated movies with happy endings," I replied. "They set unrealistic expectations." She laughed. A real laugh. That sound hit me harder than any accusation ever had. Dinner was flawless. That's how I knew something was wrong. Life doesn't allow flawless without a price. Between courses, stories surfaced. Old jokes. Familiar wounds dressed up as nostalgia. I watched Eleanor closely, searching for signs of the woman I used to know. The one I had built all this for. Halfway through the main course, the price arrived. It came in the form of Thomas Reed. Thomas had been my closest friend for 30 years. Business partner, best man, the kind of man who knew where all the bodies were buried and had helped dig a few of them. I hadn't invited him, which meant someone else had. He stood at the edge of the dining room, holding a glass of wine he hadn't paid for, wearing the expression of a man who believed the past was a suggestion, not a rule. "Walter," he said, "Merry Christmas." The room went quiet in that specific way silence does when it smells blood. Eleanor's hand tightened around her glass. Just slightly. Enough. I looked at Thomas, then at Eleanor, then back at Thomas. Patterns have a way of finishing themselves when you finally look at them straight. "Did you know?" I asked her, softly. She didn't answer right away. She didn't have to. The truth, when it comes, never knocks. It uses its own key. That was the moment I understood. The Christmas I bought, the life I built, the love I waited for, it had all been addressed to the wrong person. And somewhere between the snow I ordered and the guests I curated, a different kind of miracle had already begun, quiet and inconvenient. Like all the real ones, the tree lights flickered. Not planned, not paid for. I smiled, for the first time that night, without trying. Thomas Reed had the decency to look uncomfortable. That alone told me everything I needed to know. If he'd walked in confident, smug, or theatrical, I could have written the scene off as coincidence or bad timing. But discomfort means history. It means rehearsal. It means guilt that's had time to mature. "Walter," he said again, softer now, as if volume could undo years. "I didn't realize, no one ever does," I replied. My voice sounded calm, which surprised me. Inside, something old and carefully maintained had finally cracked. Like a bone that had been healing wrong for decades and decided it was done pretending. Around us, guests stared at their plates with sudden fascination. Rich people are excellent at ignoring emotional emergencies. It's a survival skill. Claire appeared near the wall, frozen in that professional half-step where she was ready to intervene or disappear, depending on my next move. Eleanor still hadn't said a word. That silence was louder than Thomas's entrance. It carried weight, memory, consent. "Would you like to explain?" I asked Thomas. "Or should I just enjoy the rest of this meal assuming my life has been a very elaborate joke?" He swallowed. I think you should sit down," I said, "before you fall and embarrass yourself. This carpet cost more than your first company," he said. Eleanor finally looked at me. Not with anger, not with shame, with exhaustion. The kind that comes from holding a story inside for too long and discovering its grown teeth. "It wasn't planned," she said. I nodded. "Nothing important ever is." The room felt too warm. Or maybe I was finally feeling something after years of insulation. I waved a hand, dismissing the staff. They vanished with military precision. Dishes removed, wine poured and left untouched. The guests remained, trapped by curiosity and the social contract that says leaving during emotional collapse is rude. "Tell him," Thomas said to Eleanor, his voice brittle. "He deserves that much." Deserves. A fascinating word. People love using it when they're about to confess something unforgivable. Eleanor took a breath. "It started 20 years ago, after the merger. You were never home, Walter. You remember that?" "I remember building an empire," I said. "I remember doing it for us." She smiled sadly. "That's the problem. You were always doing it for us. I was alone with it." I wanted to argue. I had entire speeches prepared for this moment. I'd practiced them in mirrors and airports and empty hotel rooms. But the truth has a way of draining the theater from language. "And Thomas?" I asked. She looked at him, then back at me. He listened. Thomas winced. "I didn't mean for it to go as far as it did." "Of course not," I said. "None of us ever mean for gravity to work." Someone cleared their throat. I turned. It was the former senator, suddenly very interested in being elsewhere. "Walter, perhaps we should know," I said. "Stay. Christmas is about togetherness, isn't it?" A few people laughed nervously. They thought it was a joke. I almost admired that dot in another part of the house. The grandfather clock chimed the half hour. Each strike sounded like punctuation. So how long? I asked. Eleanor hesitated. That told me more than the number ever could. Long enough, she said. I leaned back in my chair. Did you love him? She didn't answer immediately. That answer mattered more than anything else. I loved who I was when I wasn't invisible, she said. That one landed clean. No deflection, no drama. Just a blade sharpened by honesty. Thomas stood up again, apparently committed to making the worst decisions possible. Walter, I never wanted to hurt you, I swear. I thought you thought I'd never notice, I said. And you were right. Congratulations. You win the long game. Silence settled in, thick and awkward. I felt oddly light, like a man who's been carrying a heavy coat into summer and finally taken it off. Did you come tonight to tell me? I asked Eleanor. She shook her head. No, I came because you invited me. And because I was tired of lying. That makes one of us, I said, then caught myself. The irony tasted bitter and funny at the same time. No, that makes two of us. I've been lying to myself for years. I stood. The room stiffened, expecting a speech, a breakdown, maybe a glass thrown dramatically against imported stone. Instead, I said, dinner is over. Dessert is optional. Honesty, apparently, is not. The guests scattered with impressive speed. Within minutes, the house felt enormous again. Just me, Eleanor, Thomas, and the echo of a life rearranging itself. Thomas approached me cautiously, like a man nearing a wild animal he used to feed. If you want me to leave, I want you to remember this, I said. Every time you tell yourself you didn't mean to. Every time you pour a drink and call yourself a good man. This moment. Burn it in, he nodded. He looked older than I remembered, smaller. Then he left. Eleanor and I stood facing each other across the long table, remnants of perfection between us. I never stopped loving you, she said quietly. I just stopped believing you could see me. There it was. The core of it. Not betrayal. Not lust. Invisibility. I built this entire night for you, I said. Every detail. Every light. Every lie I told myself about how things could still be. She glanced at the tree. The gifts. The snow obediently falling outside. It's beautiful, she said. But it's not what I needed. I laughed. A real laugh. Low, tired, almost fond. Story of my life. She reached out, hesitated, then pulled her hand back. I should go. Yes, I said. You should. She paused at the doorway. Walter, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. So am I replied. And I meant it more than I expected. After she left, I poured myself a drink and sat alone beneath the tree I'd bought to fix something unfixable. The lights flickered again. Once, twice. I thought about all the things money had given me. Control, distance, comfort, and all the things it hadn't. Outside, the snow kept falling, free, and scheduled. Somewhere deep in the house, a door creaked softly. Not Eleanor's, not Thomas's. Something else was moving, and for the first time that night, I didn't try to predict it. I didn't investigate the sound right away. That's something people say in movies, right before they die. I stayed where I was, under the 40-foot tree that smelled like money and forests, and let the ice in my glass melt into something honest. The door creaked again, slow, careful. Whoever it was didn't want to be noticed, which narrowed the possibilities down to staff or regret. I'd already dismissed one of those. Claire, I said, without turning around. If you're trying to surprise me, now is a bad time to practice. A pause. Then footsteps, lighter than I expected. It's not Claire, a woman's voice said. And I'm not trying to surprise you. I'm trying not to panic. I turned. She stood near the edge of the great hall, half hidden by shadow and bad timing. Early 30s, maybe. Dark hair pulled back in a way that suggested practicality over vanity. She wore a simple black dress and held a catering tray like a shield. Her eyes were wide, alert, and doing the kind of quick math that comes from being somewhere you didn't plan to be when a life changes direction. I'm the replacement server, she added quickly. One of the regulars got sick. I was told to stay out of sight unless needed. I swear I wasn't eavesdropping. Well, not intentionally. I studied her. She didn't look like trouble. which, in my experience, is exactly what trouble looks like. Congratulations, I said. You've witnessed the emotional collapse of a billionaire. There's no bonus for that, but you do get a story. She smiled, despite herself. A small one, reflexive. I already have a few. Of course you do, I said. Everyone does. Most people just don't spill them over imported marble. She relaxed slightly, lowering the tray. Do you want me to leave? I considered it. The silence had been getting heavy. Too familiar. This woman was new, and paid for, and planned. No, I said. If you were going to rob me, you'd have done it by now. Sit, or stand. I don't own that part of the floor yet. She hesitated, then stepped closer, placing the tray on a side table. I'm Lily, she said. Lily Carter. Walter Hayes, I replied. You probably already knew that. She nodded. It's hard not to. In a house like this, we stood there, to people who had arrived at the same place by very different wrong turns. The tree lights hummed softly above us. I'm sorry, she said after a moment. About what happened? I didn't mean to hear it, but people think walls are thicker when money is involved. They're thinner, I said. They just look better. She laughed. A real laugh. It surprised both of us. So, she said carefully, is Christmas officially canceled? I looked around. The table half cleared. The abandoned gifts. The snow still performing outside. No, I said. It's just changed genres. That earned another smile. She glanced at the gifts. Those for her. Yes. And for an idea of her I carried longer than I should have. What will you do with them? Return them, I said. Or donate them. Or set them on fire dramatically and scare the neighbors. I haven't decided. She tilted her head. Fire is very seasonal. I raised my glass in her direction. You're hired. She chuckled, then seemed to remember herself. I should probably finish my shift. Your shift ended the moment the truth walked in, I said. I'll talk to Claire. You're officially off duty. She looked relieved, then uncertain. And then what? That was the question, wasn't it? Then, I said, you keep me company until midnight. Strictly conversational. I'm too old to be interesting and too rich to be trusted. She studied me for a long second, then nodded. Okay. But I warn you I ask questions. Excellent, I said. I've been avoiding good ones for decades. We sat by the fire, far from the table where my life had just been audited. I told her the polite version of my story. She told me hers without being asked. She was from Oregon. Worked 3 jobs. Had an aging father who believed stubbornness was a retirement plan. She liked books that ended badly but honestly. What about you? She asked. Before the money. I thought about that. It had been a while. I sold radios out of the back of a truck, I said. I believed hard work was enough. Turns out it's just a down payment. She smiled. You don't talk like the men I usually serve. They usually talk too much, I said. Or not enough. Both are expensive habits. The clock chimed midnight. Christmas arrived quietly, without announcement or permission. Outside, the snow stopped. Lily stood. I should go. Yes, I said. And then, because apparently I was learning, I added, but thank you for not being part of the plan. She paused at the door. For what it's worth, she said, echoing a phrase I'd heard earlier that night. You didn't look broken. Just rerouted. After she left, I stayed by the fire until the embers faded. I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Not hope. Hope is loud. This was smaller, quieter, like curiosity. Upstairs, I passed a mirror and didn't look away. Somewhere between the snow I ordered and the truth I didn't. Christmas had arrived anyway. I woke up late the next morning, which at my age feels like rebellion. The house was quiet in that way only very large houses can be. No echoes. Just the sense that sound itself had decided to take the day off. Sunlight slipped through the tall windows without asking permission, landing on the rug like it had always belonged there. The tree was still lit. Of course it was. I'd paid for lights that refused to acknowledge emotional timelines. For a few seconds, I lay there trying to remember why my chest felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Then memory arrived, punctual as a tax bill. I didn't get dressed right away. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the house breathe. Somewhere far below, a door closed gently. Life continuing. That annoyed me more than it should have. By the time I made it downstairs, Claire was already waiting. She always was. She held a tablet like it might explode. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes," she said carefully. Her tone had the softness people use when they're not sure whether you're fragile or dangerous. "Morning," I replied. "If this is about last night, I don't want an apology and I don't want explanations." She nodded. "Then you'll be pleased to know I've prepared neither." "Good woman. There is," she continued, "a minor complication." "Of course there is. The catering company called. One of their temporary staff didn't sign out properly." Lily Carter. My stomach reacted before my brain could pretend indifference. "Yes," I said. "And they're asking if we can confirm she left on time. Apparently there's some concern about liability." I smiled. "Tell them she left with my gratitude and without stealing anything that wasn't already broken." Claire hesitated. "She did ask me to give you something." She handed me an envelope, plain, white, not expensive enough to be threatening. Inside was a folded piece of paper, handwritten. That alone felt rebellious in my world. "Thank you for the conversation. And for the fire. I hope you keep the parts of Christmas that didn't cost anything." Lily read it twice. Then once more, slowly, like it might change if I wasn't careful. Claire watched me, curiosity carefully contained. "Shall I respond?" "No," I said. "Some things end better without replies." She nodded, though I could tell she disagreed on principle. The rest of the day tried very hard to be normal. Emails, calls, a board member who wanted reassurance that my personal life wasn't about to impact shareholder confidence. I assured him it wouldn't. That was true. The shareholders had already taken what they came for. Around noon, Eleanor called. I stared at the phone until it stopped ringing. Then I stared at it a little longer, just to make sure it understood who was in charge. In another part of the city, Eleanor Brooks sat alone in her apartment, phone in hand, wondering when exactly her life had become a series of almosts. Almost honest, almost brave, almost free. She had told herself the truth the night before. Finally, she just hadn't anticipated how lonely truth could feel without someone to share the silence. Back in my office, I poured coffee I didn't want and looked out at the grounds. The snow had melted quickly, leaving behind damp earth and the faint outline of pots people used when they thought no one was watching. I thought about Thomas. I thought about the years I trusted him with my money, my time, my blind spots. Betrayal, I'd learned, rarely announces itself. It prefers convenience. I didn't hear him arrive. I felt him. "Walter," Thomas said from the doorway. He looked worse in daylight. "Guilt ages people unevenly." "I didn't invite you," I said. "I know." "Then this will be quick." He nodded. "I came to apologize. Properly. Without witnesses. Without excuses. That would be a first." He swallowed. "I loved her." I closed my eyes. "Counted to 3. "You loved yourself," I said. "She was just there." He flinched, which confirmed my suspicion. "I don't expect forgiveness," he continued. "But I couldn't leave things the way they were." "You already did," I said. "Years ago." "This is just you noticing." Silence settled between us. Old silence. Familiar, poisoned. "I'm stepping down from the firm," he said quietly. "Selling my shares back to you. At a loss." That got my attention. "Why?" "Because every time I walk into that building, I see your face. And hers. And I realized the cost was higher than I calculated." I studied him. For the first time in decades, I wasn't sure what he wanted from me. "Do it," I said finally. "And don't contact me again." Not to explain. Not to reminisce. Not to ask how I'm doing. He nodded, relief and regret wrestling on his face. Then he left. I didn't feel victorious. I felt done. That evening, I found myself driving without direction, a habit I hadn't indulged since before the money learned my name. The city looked different when you weren't trying to own it. Smaller, kinder, more honest. I passed a diner with fogged windows and cheap decorations still clinging stubbornly to Christmas. I almost didn't stop. Inside, it smelled like coffee and second chances. Lily stood behind the counter tying her apron, mid-sentence with another server. She looked up. Recognition flickered. Then surprise. Then something like amusement. "Well," she said, stepping closer, "this place definitely doesn't charge for snow." "No," I replied. But the coffee looks dangerous. She laughed. Want some? I nodded. Yes. And maybe something unscheduled. She poured the coffee. Strong, honest. No ceremony. We sat in a booth near the window. To people temporarily and important in a world that usually demanded explanation. So, she said, did Christmas survive? It did, I said. It just stopped pretending to be something else. She smiled, softer this time. That's usually when it works. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, the clock ticked without drama. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was wondering what I'd been too busy to notice. The diner had the kind of lighting that forgives people. Soft, slightly yellow, like it understands you didn't plan to end up there. I wrapped my hands around the mug. Lily slid toward me and felt an absurd rush of gratitude for something that hadn't been curated, insured, or approved by a committee. You look like a man who doesn't usually drink coffee out of a chip cup, she said. I usually drink coffee that comes with a story about altitude and suffering, I replied. This is better. She grinned. Careful. You say things like that too often, and they'll kick you out of your tax bracket. We talked about nothing at first. Weather. The diner's ancient jukebox that only played songs about heartbreak and trucks. The way Christmas decorations always look slightly embarrassed after the holiday passes. Like guests who overstayed and know it. At some point, nothing turned into something. So, she said, stirring sugar. She didn't add, are you always this calm after emotional earthquakes, or did I just catch you on a good day? I considered lying. Old habit, comfortable, polite. No, I said, I'm usually worse, louder, or quieter. Today I'm just paying attention. She nodded, as if that explained everything. That's dangerous. I've been told. In another part of the city, Eleanor sat across from Thomas Reed in a cafe neither of them liked. They hadn't planned to meet. They never did anymore. But history has momentum, and sometimes it drags people into the same room just to see what happens. You're really leaving, she said. Yes, Thomas replied. Walter deserves that much. Eleanor looked out the window. He deserved a lot of things, yes, Thomas said. He did. Back in the diner, Lily checked the clock and sighed. I should get back. Break's almost over. Of course, I said, though the word felt heavier than it should have. She stood, then paused. You know, most men your age come in here trying to feel young. You're the first one who looks like he's trying to feel honest. That obvious. She smiled. Pain leaves fingerprints. After she walked away, I stayed. Ordered pie. Paid in cash like it was a secret. When I finally left, the city felt closer, less ornamental. That night, alone in the house that suddenly felt too large, I did something reckless. I opened a drawer I hadn't touched in years. Inside were letters. Eleanor's handwriting, mine, drafts of apologies I'd never sent because I was too busy being right. I read until the words blurred, until the past stopped arguing and started explaining. Near midnight, my phone buzzed. A message from Claire. Merhays, Eleanor Brooks called again. She asked if you were well. I stared at the screen, then typed back. Tell her I am learning. Claire responded with a single word. Noted. The next morning, Lily didn't expect to see me again. That made it easier. I came in earlier, before the diner filled with regulars and routines. She was refilling napkin holders, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled up like she was ready to fight the day. You're back, she said, surprised but not displeased. I wanted to see if yesterday was a hallucination, I replied. Turns out the coffee is still terrible. Consistent, she said. That's our brand. We fell into an easy rhythm. Short conversations between orders. Long silences that didn't itch. She told me about her father, about how stubbornness runs in families like an inherited disease. I told her about my first failure, the company I lost before I learned how to pretend losses didn't matter. You ever think about what you'd do if the money disappeared? She asked. Sometimes, I said. Mostly I think about who would disappear with it. She nodded. That's usually the answer. Days passed. Christmas decorations came down. Life resumed its impersonation of normal. Thomas finalized his exit. The firm stabilized. My name remained valuable, which felt increasingly irrelevant. Eleanor stopped calling. One evening, Lily joined me after her shift. 2 slices of pie between us like an agreement neither of us had negotiated. This isn't nothing, she said, gesturing vaguely at us. Just so we're clear. No, I said. It isn't. But it's also not a rescue, she added. I'm not here to fix you. I smiled. That's a relief. I'm terrible at being fixed. She studied me. Then what is it? I thought about the Christmas I bought. The one I lost. The one I didn't plan. It's curiosity, I said. Mutual. Uninsured. She laughed. That might be the most expensive thing you've ever invested in. Worth it, I said. Outside, snow began to fall again. Real snow this time. No invoices. No guarantees. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to control it. I just watched it land quietly, where it wanted to. Snow has a way of making promises it doesn't intend to keep out by January. The city was white again, but thinner this time, like it knew better than to overdo the performance. I found myself measuring days not by meetings or markets, but by whether I'd see Lily's handwriting on a receipt, whether she'd tilt her head when she listened, whether silence between us would stay comfortable or turn ambitious. I told myself it was harmless. That's what men my age say when they don't want to explain hope to themselves. We didn't rush. That mattered. She didn't ask about my money, which was either refreshing or suspicious. I didn't ask about her past beyond what she volunteered. There are questions that sound like curiosity but behave like audits. I was done with those. One afternoon, she came by the house. Not the great hall. Not the tree room. Just the kitchen. She stood there, hands in her coat pockets, taking in the scale of things with an expression that wasn't so much as calculation. This place could eat people, she said. It's tried, I replied. I keep feeding it staff. She smiled, but her eyes lingered on the counters, the appliances that looked like they could launch a satellite. Do you ever feel like a guest here? All the time, I said. That's the problem. We cooked. Or rather, she cooked while I stayed out of the way and learned things. She moved with confidence, the kind that comes from necessity instead of instruction. At one point, she caught me watching. What? She asked. Nothing, I said. I just realized I'd spent a lifetime paying people to do things I never learned how to enjoy. She shrugged. You're learning now. That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. Later, sitting at the counter with plates between us, she asked, do you miss her? I didn't pretend not to know who she meant. Yes, I said, but not the way I used to. How so? I miss the version of myself I thought I was when I loved her. She nodded slowly. That's usually the one that hurts. The cross down. Eleanor was discovering something similar. Without Walter's orbit, her days felt strangely weightless. She had expected relief. What she got instead was quiet, and with it, questions she'd postponed for years. She walked past a jewelry store and didn't stop. She noticed that. She noticed many things lately. Thomas sent her one final message. I'm leaving the city. Take care of yourself. She didn't reply. Back in my kitchen, Lily washed dishes, humming something unfamiliar. I watched the way her reflection moved in the window, overlapping with mine, 2 lives briefly sharing the same frame. Walter, she said suddenly, not turning around, are you lonely? The question landed gently. No accusation. No trap. Yes, I said. But differently now. She dried her hands, faced me. I need to say something, and I don't want you to misunderstand. I waited. I was getting better at that. I like you, she said. But I won't be someone's transition. That's fair, I said. I don't want to be one either. She studied my face, searching for cracks, for urgency, for the familiar shape of men who rush because time scares them. What do you want? She asked. I thought about the Christmas I bought. The truth I hadn't budgeted for. The miracle that showed up without asking. I want mornings, I said. Unimpressive ones. I want to learn which silences mean comfort and which mean trouble. I want to be corrected without feeling accused. She smiled, small and real. That's a good list. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, the house felt less predatory. A week later, Eleanor called. I answered this time. Walter, she said. Her voice was steadier. I heard about Thomas. Yes, I'm glad, she said. For you, for me, I agreed. There was a pause. Then, are you seeing someone? I didn't lie. Yes, she exhaled. Not sharply, not painfully, just honestly. I thought you might. I hope you're well, I said. And meant it, without reservation. I am, she replied. I'm getting there. After we hung up, I didn't feel triumph. I felt closure, which is quieter and far more useful. That night, Lily and I walked through the city, snow crunching beneath our feet. No reservations. No schedule. Just movement. You know, she said, people are going to talk. They always do. I said. The difference is whether you listen. She slipped her arm through mine, tentative but intentional. The future didn't announce itself. It never does. But for the first time, I wasn't trying to buy it. I was letting it arrive. People noticed before I did. That's the funny thing about change, it announces itself to others long before it feels real to you. The board noticed. The staff noticed. Even the house noticed. Rooms I hadn't entered in years suddenly felt less hostile, as if they were curious about who I was becoming and willing to negotiate. Lily never tried to belong here. That was part of the danger. She didn't rearrange things or comment on the art or ask why anyone would need 6 guest bedrooms when intimacy clearly wasn't on the guest list. She treated the house like a weather condition, acknowledged, respected, but not emotionally invested. One evening, she stopped in the doorway of my study and frowned. What? I asked. This room, she said. It feels like a man arguing with himself. I looked around. The shelves of awards. The framed magazine covers. The carefully curated proof of worth. He usually wins, I said. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That's what worries me. A few days later, I received an invitation I hadn't expected and didn't want. The Christmas charity gala. Rescheduled, technically. Same people. Same cameras. Same polite lies dressed up as generosity. My name was on the honorary list, underlined twice, like it might escape if not supervised. I don't want to go, I told Lily over dinner. You don't have to, she said. I know, I replied. That's new. She studied me. Is Eleanor going to be there? Yes. And Thomas? No, she nodded. Then you should go. That surprised me. Why? Because avoiding things gives them power, she said. And because I want to see that world once. Just to know it's real. It was my turn to hesitate. It's not kind, she shrugged. Neither is life. I'll wear flat shoes. The night of the gala, the city sparkled in that artificial way money loves. Lights everywhere. Smiles rehearsed. Apologies preloaded. Lily looked uncomfortable in the dress she borrowed. Not because it didn't fit it did, but because she hadn't decided yet whether she was allowed to enjoy it. That restraint made her luminous in a way diamonds never manage. People stared, then whispered, then smiled too brightly. Walter, someone said, hand extended. Didn't expect to see you. I'm full of disappointments, I replied. Eleanor arrived an hour later. She looked good. Not younger. Not desperate. Just settled. That almost hurt more. She saw me. Then Lily. Something passed over her face, recognition, maybe, or relief. It was hard to tell. She approached. Walter. Eleanor. Her gaze moved to Lily. Hello. Hi, Lily said, unafraid and armed. Eleanor smiled. You seem happy. I considered the word. I seem honest, I said. The happiness is still negotiating terms. Eleanor laughed softly. That sounds like you. We talked, carefully. No landmines. No confessions. Just to people acknowledging the end of something without trying to resurrect it. When Eleanor walked away, Lily leaned in. She doesn't hate me. No, I said. She hates time. Later, a man I barely remembered cornered Lily near the bar. His smile was the kind men wear when they think charm is a permission slip. So, he said, glancing at me, are you enjoying the view? Lily met his eyes. I'm enjoying the company. He laughed. You know who he is, right? Yes, she said. Do you know who you are? The man blinked, then excused himself. I stared at her. You didn't have to do that. I know, she said. I wanted to. On the drive home, the city blurred past, quieter now. Any regrets? She asked. Plenty, I said, but not tonight. She rested her head against the window. Good. At home, she didn't stay. That mattered too. I like us, she said at the door. I just don't want us to become a story people tell instead of something we live. I nodded. Neither do I. After she left, I stood in the hall for a long time, listening to the house. It sounded different now. Less confident, more curious. That night, I dreamed of snow falling without direction, without permission, not covering things up, just landing. When I woke, I realized something unsettling and quietly profound. For the first time in decades, my life wasn't impressive. It was mine. The first crack appeared in a place I didn't expect: routine. It was a Tuesday. No symbolism, no weather worthy of metaphor, just a Tuesday that refused to stay quiet. I woke up early, made coffee myself badly, and stood at the kitchen window watching nothing in particular. That's when it hit me. I no longer knew what I was supposed to want next. For 40 years, my desires had come prepackaged. Grow the company, fix the marriage, protect the image, buy silence when things got messy. Now the silence wasn't for sale, and the image had stopped asking for maintenance. That should have felt liberating. Instead, it felt exposed. Lily noticed before I said anything. She always did. "You're restless," she said one evening, folding napkins at the diner with a necessary precision. "I'm retired," I replied. "That's supposed to be the dream." She raised an eyebrow. "No, that's supposed to be the reward." "Different thing?" I didn't argue. That worried me. A week later, the firm announced a restructuring I hadn't approved but could have stopped. I chose not to. The press called it visionary restraint. Claire called it growth. I called it letting go before my hands started shaking. Then Eleanor showed up at the house and announced, uninvited, unafraid. Claire led her in with a look that asked permission retroactively. I nodded. I was tired of locking doors that only existed in my head. Eleanor stood in the great hall, hands clasped, eyes moving slowly, as if she were saying goodbye to a place that had once known her well. "I won't stay long," she said. "That's usually a lie," I replied. "But go on." She smiled faintly. "I'm moving." I waited. "To Arizona," she continued. "My sister's health isn't great. She needs help. And I need distance. From me. From who I was with you," she said. "Honest, clean, no blood on the floor." I nodded. "That makes sense." She hesitated, then reached into her bag and handed me a small envelope. "Thicker than Lily's had been, older. I should have given you this years ago," she said. After she left, I sat alone and opened it. Inside was a letter dated 22 years earlier. Eleanor's handwriting, tighter than I remembered. She wrote about loneliness, about Thomas, about guilt that had already begun fermenting into something irreversible. She wrote that she was afraid to tell me because she believed truly that I loved my ambition more than her honesty. That hurt. Not because it was cruel, because it was accurate. At the bottom, one final line: "If you ever read this, I hope it means you're finally listening." I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. No drama, no tearing, just acceptance arriving late, like most meaningful things. That night, Lily came over. She could tell something had shifted the moment she walked in. She didn't ask right away. She kicked off her shoes, sat on the floor by the couch, and waited. That patience was more intimate than touch. "Eleanor was here," I said eventually. She nodded. "Okay." "She's moving?" Another nod. "Okay." I watched her carefully. No jealousy, no fear, just presence. She gave me a letter. I added. From before everything fell apart. Lily looked up at me then, and I realized I spent most of my life confusing control with care. She smiled gently. "A lot of people do. They just don't get receipts." Silence stretched. Comfortable, but alert. "Lily," I said, and heard something new in my voice. Not authority, not wealth, vulnerability, and dressed and standing in the open. She met my eyes. "Yes, I don't want to make you smaller to fit into my life," I said. "And I don't want to become a phase you outgrow because I was too slow to change." Her expression softened, but there was steel under it. "Then don't." "I'm trying," I said. "I know," she replied. "That's why I'm still here." Weeks passed. Quiet ones, real ones. We argued once about nothing important, which meant everything was. She accused me of disappearing when things felt uncertain. I accused her of assuming she'd be the one left behind. We were both right. We apologized without negotiating terms. One afternoon, I sold the house. Not impulsively, not dramatically, just deliberately. The market reacted. People panicked. I felt calm. When I told Lily, she stared at me like I'd just announced I was learning a new language at my age. Are you sure? She asked. No, I said, but I'm certain enough to try. Where will you go? I smiled. Somewhere that doesn't echo. She exhaled, slow and thoughtful. That's big. So was the house, I said. And look how that turned out. She laughed, then grew serious. I need to tell you something too. I waited. I got accepted into a program, she said. Culinary school, full-time, in Portland. The words landed softly and still knocked the wind out of me. When? I asked. In 3 months. 3 months. Enough time to pretend it wasn't real. Not enough time to lie convincingly. I'm proud of you, I said. And meant it, even as something tightened in my chest. She studied my face. You don't have to come. I didn't answer right away. Outside, the last of the winter snow slid off the roof, hitting the ground with a quiet finality. I know, I said finally. That night, I lay awake longer than usual, staring at a ceiling I would soon no longer own. For the first time, love wasn't asking me what I could provide. It was asking who I was willing to become. And for once, I didn't try to buy the answer.